I am 36 years old, and the most expensive thing I owned the night my wife called me poor in front of 200 people was the ring on her finger. She didn't know that. That was always the problem. He can't afford to be here, honestly. I don't know why I still bother. She said it with a laugh. That particular laugh, the one she saved for rooms where she needed people to know she was better than her circumstances. I was 3 steps behind her, arriving at the table where she'd already settled into her crowd, already performing. The gala was soft-lit and chandelier gold, the kind of room where money did announce itself because it didn't have to. I was wearing a navy suit I'd owned for 4 years. The cuffs were slightly worn. I knew they were worn. I had left them that way on purpose, though she had no reason to know that yet. She didn't see me arrive. She was mid-sentence, her hand gesturing, her champagne tilted. The man across from her, some executive she'd been trying to impress for 2 months, smiled the smile of a man receiving exactly what he came for. Then she felt me behind her. She turned, and for a half second I saw it. Not guilt, just recalibration. She pivoted smoothly. There he is, in between things right now, as I'm sure he'll tell you himself. Then she reached down, opened her clutch, slid the ring off her finger in one practice motion, and dropped inside. I've been meaning to return this anyway. The room didn't stop. Only the nearest table heard it. But 200 people might as well have been 2 million, because I heard it, and I am the one who has to carry it. I nodded once. I didn't speak. I had spent 11 years building something enormous in near total silence. One more moment of it was nothing I couldn't manage. My mother cleaned office buildings for most of my childhood. 3 contracts, different nights of the week, a bus between each one. I used to wait for her in the lobby of the largest building on Clement Street. A mid-rise with gray marble floors and a security guard named Frank who let me do my homework at his desk and once told me, without irony, "One day you'll own one of these." I was 12. I wrote it down when I got home, not because I believed it, but because no one had ever said anything like it to me before. I acquired the building's parent company at 33, quietly, through a shelf structure that kept my name 3 layers back. My mother retired the following year. I arranged a pension through a third party so she would feel no obligation. She thinks she saved enough. She didn't. She saved some of it. The rest is mine, paid for without a name attached, because some gifts only land if they arrive without weight. She still doesn't know. I have rehearsed telling her 100 times. I keep waiting for the right moment, the same way I kept waiting for the right moment with my wife. I am beginning to understand that the right moment is a thing men invent to avoid the truth that there is only ever the moment you are standing in. I watched her from the far end of the table for 2 courses. She had positioned herself beside the executive deliberately, and she was charming him with the ease of someone who had made a study of it. She was telling a story about our first date, about the borrowed car. "I should have known then," she said, and the table laughed. I looked down at my bread plate and thought about the trip I had booked. It was in my desk drawer at home. 12 days, 2 tickets, a hotel with a terrace that faced the sea. I had printed the itinerary and folded it into a plain envelope because I wanted to hand it to her in person and watch her understand that everything was about to change. I had planned to tell her everything the following morning. I had wanted to give her the chance to receive the full truth in private, with no audience, no performance required of either of us. I had wanted to see her face when she understood who I actually was, and I had wanted that face to be real. The trip is still in the drawer, unused. I have not been able to look at it. A waiter appeared at my shoulder during the 3rd course. He placed a folded note beside my glass with the discretion of someone who had done this 100 times. I read it once, folded it back, and looked toward the head table. Edmund, the foundation director, the first man who had ever backed me when the company, was a desk in a spare bedroom, and a woman named Ruth sitting across him on a borrowed chair, was watching me. He raised his glass a fraction. I stood. I had met Edmund at a conference I could barely afford to attend. I had spoken to no one for 2 hours because I didn't have the right shoes for the room, and I knew it. He had found me near the window with a glass of water and said, "You have the look of a man with a plan and no one to tell it to yet." We had spoken for 40 minutes. By the end of the conference, he had wired the first transfer. No equity, no board seat, just belief in a handshake agreement. His foundation would receive the first major philanthropic act when I was in position to make one. We had dinner occasionally in the years that followed. He watched the marriage the way a man watches weather, from a distance. With a forecast he keeps to himself. He told me once he wanted to say something. I asked him not to. If she learns because someone told her. I said, I'll never know what she would have chosen. He honored that. He is the only person outside my company who did. Ruth appeared at my shoulder the moment I reached the head table. She had been in the room all evening. I knew that she had told me she would be, but she had been invisible to everyone else, which is what she does. She has been doing it since she answered job board listing 9 years ago for a part-time admin coordinator, showed up to a flat in Beckmore Road, and was offered tea by a man who didn't yet know what he was building. She took the job. She has never once acted as though she is owed more than she receives, and she receives considerably more than she used to. At the gala, she moved with a tablet in 3 words, and I understood exactly what the 3 words meant. I later learned that my wife had spoken to her near the canopy table earlier in the evening. A small, slightly dismissive comment about the food. Ruth had smiled and said nothing. She told me this without bitterness. Afterward, in the way she tells me most things, as information, not as injury. The announcement came with applause that lasted, I counted, approximately 40 seconds. My name, my company, the endowment figure, which I had never said out loud in public before. The photograph on the screen behind the stage was from 7 years ago. I was leaner, the suit was worse, but the expression was the same. Edmund spoke briefly about the work ahead. I spoke briefly about the people who had believed first. I didn't look at the table where my wife was sitting. I didn't need to. I heard later from Ruth that a phone had gone under the tablecloth, that the kick had landed twice before it landed, that a champagne glass had tipped. She intercepted me near the cloakroom as the evening was closing. I saw her coming and didn't move. She was rehearsing something. I know her face when she is rehearsing, and she hadn't settled on it yet by the time she reached me. I let her reach me. I waited the full measure of breath, and then I spoke first, quietly, so only she could hear it. You returned the ring. Good. That was the honest thing. I meant it. I still mean it. In a night full of performance, hers, mine, the room's, the ring dropping into the clutch was the one genuine moment. She had shown me, finally, exactly where we stood, without the courtesy of a private conversation, but without pretense either. I have spent years living without pretense. I recognize it when it finally arrives, even when it arrives in the wrong shape. I buttoned my coat. Ruth was at the door. The car was waiting. 3 days later, the house transferred into her name. No note. My solicitor handled the paperwork, and I asked for no acknowledgement. People who knew what I'd done called it generous. People who didn't know called it suspicious. I called it finished. She had never called the house ours. Not really. She had always called it mine, and always in a way that made it sound like a liability. Now it was hers, fully, and she would have to find another word for it. She called my number that evening. It rang once. Ruth's voicemail. I don't know if she left a message. I didn't check. The ring itself, I have thought about it more than I should. It was a plain band, simple setting, small stone. The stone was not small in origin. It came from my grandmother's necklace, a piece my mother had worn once on her wedding day and then locked away to preserve it. When I got engaged, she pressed it into my hand without ceremony. Use it for something that matters. I had it reset by a craftsman in the east of the city. I had planned to tell my wife the story one day over a dinner table with gray in both our hair, the kind of story that lands heavy with time behind it. The full telling would have required her to know who I was first. I was still building toward that. When she dropped the ring into the clutch, the stone clicked once against the metal clasp. A small sound. No one heard it. I heard it. 6 weeks later, at a press event I could no longer reasonably avoid, a journalist near the back raised her hand and asked what she thought was a business question. What's the biggest risk you've ever taken that didn't pay off? I thought about it genuinely. I thought about Frank at the security desk. I thought about Edmund at the window with his glass of water. I thought about Ruth on a borrowed chair in Beckmore Road, taking a job for a company that didn't yet have a name. I thought about a folded itinerary still sitting in a desk drawer home. 2 tickets, a sea-facing terrace. 12 days I had imagined spending finally telling the truth. And then I gave the journalist the honest answer, believing that the people closest to you will see you clearly before the world does. I moved to the next question. The clip ran for 4 days across every platform that existed. The comments said mostly the same thing in different words. He's not talking about business. Some people said I was cold. Some said I was dignified. Some said I was still in love with her and didn't know it. I read none of the comment myself. Ruth read them and gave me a summary, the way she gives me most things, as information, not injury. The original clip from the gala was still circulating beneath the newer one. A few seconds of a woman removing a ring. A man nodding once. No raised voices. No visible devastation. People kept asking where the drama was, not understanding that the drama was entirely in the nod. 11 years of silence compressed into a single movement in my head. That was the whole story. That was always the whole story. Somewhere across the city, a ring was still in a clutch, neither returned nor worn. She never corrected the comments about the gala. Neither did I. That silence is the only thing we still share, and some days I think it is the most honest conversation we ever had.